let's start that over. Which? Axle snappers.
Oh, axle snappers.
Sorry.
Hello and welcome to Adventures in Game Writing. We kind of want to tell the everyday stories and talk about the day-to-day normal stuff that you get to do when you're a game writer when you're not Chris Avallone somehow. So if we're not Chris Avallone, who are we? I'm Leah Miller. I've written for a bunch of games, mostly MMOs. I worked on Dark Age of Camelot, Warhammer Online, and WildStar. And as a writer and a content designer, and we'll go down and introduce ourselves to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out. My name is John Ryan. I worked as a writer at studios like Microsoft and ArenaNet, and I was an editor most recently at Bungie.
Hi, I'm Nicole Kline. I have done writing and copy editing for independent video games and board games, mostly board games.
Hello, is this going? I can't. No? Okay. My name's Cohen Edenfield. I'm the head writer for Hive Swap, which is the Homestuck video game. And, well, it's growing in popularity. And I'm also co-writing Camp's Not Dead, an FMV game, which is going to be coming out in a couple of years. Hopefully after Hive Swap.
What's up, guys? I'm James Pianka. I write card names and flavor text for Magic the Gathering. What's up? What's up? NPC dialogue for an unannounced Undead Labs title. I have a board game out called Roots, a game of inventing words, and I'm currently full-time at a hybrid developer/publisher called Firefly Games in Santa Monica, California.
All right, now this is the question that we always get if we take questions, so we should get it out of the way. Let's all talk about how we got started in game writing. I started out in the game industry as a customer service representative. I helped people in MMOs deal with so that was my job, and I ended up writing some of the documentation for that, and then eventually the game industry has, in some places, still a very mailroom attitude, where at some companies, if you get entry-level jobs, they periodically look for people from those entry-level jobs to move up if you're actually good at and dedicated to the entry-level job. The problem is telling which companies still have that philosophy or not. But yeah, I'm one of those old-school mailroom success stories is how I ended up writing and designing games. And so I'll toss it to you, John.
Okay. I got my start because I answered an ad in Craigslist. It was a simpler time. I don't recommend you do that now. It was an ad for just like a game writing ad, and I was working at a newspaper. For the younger folks, newspapers were these sheets of paper that had the day's news on it, and you bought them once a day.
Every day?
It was very inefficient.
Yeah, we thought it was a good idea at the time. But I went and I answered an ad. I had done video game reviews for MSNBC for a little while before this, and they said, do you like video games and can you write? And I went, okay. And it was on Craigslist. And again, I was a naive child and I shouldn't have done that. But they said, I got a phone call that said, hey, we saw your resume. We're with Microsoft Game Studio. And I went, no. So I went in for an interview and it worked, and I ended up working on post-launch support for Project Gotham Racing 4 and did the official online companion piece for Fable 2. Yeah. Aw, thank you. And then I went, did work at Microsoft Casual Games, and then one thing led to another, and I became a responsible employee and writer and found my stuff getting published, and it's amazing to this day.
Great story. I mean, when people ask me, I have one of those boring stories ever about breaking into the game industry, in that I sent out a resume, and then I became a writer for the game industry. But people have often asked me, what did you have in that cold letter? This must have been a really awesome cold letter. Like, what did you write? What were the paragraphs? Like, what actions did you send?
You're like, I hypnotized them.
And then they'll say, like, well, actually, now that I remember, I had a Grammy nomination at that time. I had schooling that was very pertinent to what the game was about, and I had studied science fiction, and I had a very good background for that particular game. So I think that's sort of why they were able to, keep my resume around and then contact me all of a sudden out of the blue to start working on this game.
I actually started as a journalist in 2009, and then I became friends with a lot of indie developers and ended up getting work doing editing, and then someone hired me to write the whole story for their game, which was awesome because they were like, here's the outline of what I want the story to be. And then I wrote it, made it into a story, and then they were like, so we changed everything, so we're gonna need you to rewrite all of it. And I was like, okay, perfect, I can do that. And I rewrote the whole thing, and they were like, never mind, we took out all of that also. So the only people who saw my story were the people who backed it at a certain Kickstarter level. And it was funny because on one of the sites where they were selling it, one of the comments was, I don't love this game, but the story's amazing. And I was like, yes. I think my boyfriend might have actually written it, I'm not sure. But since then, I've done a lot of copy editing and writing. I don't know if you guys know Dragonfin Soup. I did all the copy editing for that game. And I also am a board game designer, so I do game design, game writing, and rules editing.
I was actually in graduate school working on my PhD, and I was also working on my Twitter a lot. Sounds like a joke? It's serious? Well, it is a joke, and I'm serious. And I realized I was making a fair amount of money just by selling t-shirts and prints of tweets. I actually did handwritten tweets for a little bit. For $5, I would write a tweet for you and mail it to your home. I think that was actually the first professional writing I ever did. But I decided I was done with grad school because you have to pay someone else to let you do writing, and that's a little bit below what I was shooting for. So 3 days before I finished, I got an email from Andrew Hussey, who writes Homestuck, asking if I wanted to work on the Homestuck game, Hive Swap. And I started off just writing little bits of descriptions and character dialogue, and over time just kept writing more and more and more of it. Similar thing happened with the other game I'm working on. I just got a message out of the blue from the person I'm working on it with. So my recommendation to you is do a lot of writing in a very public sphere and have people like it a lot. So work on that.
Yeah, that's fair. I actually started with Magic as my first gig, and the pathway into that was writing about Magic and publishing it on Magic fan sites where there was a community of creative text writers for the game, sort of secretly hiding and publishing commentary. I was also in graduate school. I did an MFA in creative writing with an integrated media concentration, which I don't necessarily recommend. No one gives any shits about that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. But in that space, being in a critical theory space where people were engaging with their activity on a conceptual level, I had a reading from a class that prompted an essay, which I published on a site called Gathering Magic. I don't know if anybody reads that, but it's full of flavor text writers. They're all just hiding there, publishing, like, sort of narrative overviews of the game. And that was the connection. I met some people. I got forwarded in to the person at Wizards who handles all that. They gave me a test with some skeletal cards that I could flesh out with some fake quotes, and they liked it.
When you say skeletal, do you mean?
Entirely skeletons. Just
okay.
Reassembling skeleton. It was just like 12 different quotes for reassembling skeleton over and over again. Yeah. But you'll hear people ask that question all the time, like, how do I start writing for games? And the perennial answer is start writing for games. Like, make a game and put your writing in it. And that's a pretty annoying answer because there's a great degree of like production that goes into games, and people have a varying amount of resources at their disposal with which to do that, and different levels of collaboration available to them and stuff. So I would, alternate, or I would offer as an alternate start writing about games. And similar to Cohen's answer, get that public. Be a writer first, and develop credibility as a theorist who knows what he's talking about, or what she's talking about on that subject, and use that position as leverage to get closer to the people who matter. I've heard people who were reviewers, and they interviewed their favorite designer at their favorite game, and at the end of the interview used that proximity to offer their candidacy. And that apparently works.
It's a very good trick.
Yeah. You had something to add?
Yeah, I think we all hear the advice of, if you want to write games, or if you want to write books, or if you want to make movies, you have to study whatever that is. So, I think people in here play games, so I think we got that covered. But the idea is, if you want to write games, start by playing stuff that is good for you, that you think, aha, that's great writing, that's great characterization, that's great use of plot and theme and all that stuff. And also keep in mind the stuff that doesn't work, and try to understand, why that fails or why that just doesn't click with you. And also, it's never too early to start dinking around with stuff like Twine, to get a basic understanding about, flow and how story can go from piece to piece to piece, and then you weave into a cohesive narrative. So it's never too early to experiment or get involved in game jams, or get involved with, I was a judge for write a game in a month, which was all those poor people writing a game in a month. But you take away valuable experience, and I'll be honest, like maybe the first 2 or 3 or 5 games you make are gonna suck. It's gonna crash and burn. You're gonna stay up nights and you're gonna hate it. But by that 6th or 7th or 10th, it's gonna click, and you're gonna understand the ins and outs of creating a better narrative flow than anybody else.
And then you'll hate it, because you will always hate everything that you make.
Yeah.
But if you keep doing it, you're gonna find people who love it, and they're gonna give you feedback too. Or people are gonna say, I liked your 3rd game that you made, your 4th was kind of wobbly, but your 5th was good. You're good. If you publish it and you share it with people, you're gonna get great feedback.
Yeah. All right, I have a sort of partner question that transforms from that, because one of my other pieces of advice is do the writing that nobody else wants to do. Like, if there is some writing assignment, and if you're involved in a game space and there's some writing assignment that nobody wants, do that. You'll find a lot of writers in the game industry who are talking about how, yeah, there was I was working as a producer on a mobile game, and nobody wanted to write the 15 chipmunk battle shouts for this block puzzler, and so I did it. And yeah, okay, no, every one of us wants to write that, but yeah. So let's go down and let's talk about the most boring / workaday writing you do, and then what your favorite stuff to write is. Like, I've done a lot of sort of dry internal documentation stuff. I've written a lot of user manuals. I've done stuff like that, and that's the kind of stuff that got me into writing things more. And then my favorite thing is, of course, character dialogue, and you know, that's pretty much everybody's favorite. But some people have the impression that that's all you get to do is make awesome characters say cool things all day, when there are some slightly more pedestrian parts of our job sometimes. So let's talk about that, eh?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, we're just going down the line. I'm too tired to be creative. Go.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't say the most boring, but the most challenging thing is writing barks. And how many? Oh, sorry. Because after you write 100 variations of "look out" or "come here" or "stop," you sort of start to lose your mind. But it keeps you, I guess, honest, and it keeps you challenged. It's just when you're in the desert, when you have to write 15 different versions of "hey" or "hi," you're just like, oh God, I should have been a fireman.
I get the SARS drunk.
Yeah.
I've actually had a lot of fun doing parts, but then I've been told that I just go through a full Excel sheet and start writing that.
Yeah, when I was working at ArenaNet, I just did marathons of barks, and it's just like I'm paying for some sin at this point. But it does teach you a whole lot. I think the favorite thing is when you earn your lead's trust and they say, okay, you're gonna work on this chapter and we want you to create new characters. And you're like, oh, thank you. And then you go off and you create the character art, you create the sides, which you're gonna give off to the VO producer. And the side is, this is a biography of this character, and this is like typically what they'd say, so they get a read on the vernacular and then they can go do auditions. And you're like,
Accidentally suggest the wrong thing, which is different from suggesting the right thing. But if it's 4 or 5 hours later and they're still using this goddamn spice mix on everything they come across, which I would do too. But so you just there are days when that gets boring. But the character stuff is fun. I really like putting puns in the game. Yeah.
I was like half groaning and half excited. Well, like yes, and other people like, oh.
It's a polarizing subject.
There are about, at last count, about 19 variations on the phrase "better luck next time." So, for instance,
You can do better.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you use the spice mix on something, it might be better luck next time. If it's
don't encourage him.
You're a monster.
Yeah, if it's there's a deep fryer, it might be batter luck next time.
I'm calling the cops.
You are history's greatest monster.
Those are my favorite.
The claw is gonna just come down and grab you.
Yeah.
It's too late.
That's true. In terms of exciting, I'm actually having a joy right now with straight up crunchy combat design. Firefly is doing a game that I'm not at liberty to announce, but it is a tie-in with multiple IPs from one of the major Hollywood studios. So I'm privileged to write the voices of these characters that everybody in this room knows. They're tons of fun, and they're all meeting for the first time in this game. And
Is it marvelous?
it is not marvelous.
Is it Sex in the City?
How did you know?
And to build on something Nicole said earlier, and this is not one of the questions that I gave my panelists ahead of time, let's talk a little bit about getting feedback and collaboration. Like, what's the time you got or gave really good feedback? What's a time you had something cut that you were married to and you had to let it go? That kind of stuff. I'm gonna tell one of my weird stories first, is that I actually once came into a area that I was going to write. It was Wilderun in Wildstar, if anyone's ever gotten there. Yeah, thanks. That's why we don't have as many subscribers. No, I'm kidding. But I wandered in there, and the artist had put this gorgeous crash spaceship in the jungle, and I was like, ooh, I'm gonna look up our review of this zone to see what that spaceship is. It is not mentioned. The artist just said, crash spaceship, that would look really cool. And I was like, I'm going to write a story about this crash spaceship. And I came up with this elaborate thing and stuff like that, and I presented it to the narrative lead, and they were like, nah, maybe we'll just take the spaceship out. And I was like, no, do whatever you need to do, just we'll have to keep the spaceship. And we eventually worked together, and they came up with a story that was a little bit more what they liked, but that had incorporated some of my stuff. And the artist was so grateful that later when I went up to him and I was like, you know what this place could use? A couple of tree houses. And then I went home and I came back the next week, and there were like 5 Swiss Family Robinson style tree houses all throughout the zone. He was like, thank you for saving the spaceship. So it's like sometimes you see something that somebody else did and it inspires you, and sometimes the only way to get something done is to give up something that you really cared about. So talk both about like times somebody else in your team inspired you, and or times that you got feedback, you had to change something you cared about, and it worked out in the end. Let's start with you, James, this time. Let's go the other direction, because I've been picking on John so much this time.
Well, writing in games are an extremely collaborative and multidisciplinary medium, and it's very much a job where you check your ego at the door. And that's difficult for creators, specifically writers who are traditionally solitary creatures. But if we wanted to be novelists, we would go do that. And we're not. We're here in games because we like being down the hallway from programmers and artists and musicians and designers. That's why we're doing this. That's why it's exciting. And so
I work remotely.
I work alone in my apartment.
It's great.
I often work remotely too, but you guys get my point. And so you have to learn really quickly that your work does not serve you as an artist. It serves the title, like the piece as a game. And so if something you put forward is like really excellent and you're really wedded to it and it doesn't fit the game, like maybe there's a place for it later, but don't pitch a fit. It's like moving onward. And with Magic and the relationship is they assign a number of creative text writers on contract to a set. They'll ask us, they'll send us an email like, hey, you want to work on codename Lock and Stock? You're like, you bet I do, absolutely. And so, we get the world guide and go through it, and we all submit like 3 names and 2 quotes for every card, and they go through this big pile of submissions for every card in the set. They've got, 3 names and 2 quotes for each of, probably 5 writers, and they're going through, and they'll select the ones they want and pay out accordingly, and they might even still edit it beyond recognition by the time it hits the card. And so, they'll take the dollars, but you get to watch your work sort of mutate, for better or for worse, with Magic. It's like sometimes I'm like, I've seen them make some editorial changes that I thought really elevated the work, and I was really stoked on. For instance, the flavor text on Karlov of the, as the new Black and White legend with Teyza. Does Teyza think me blind to her scheming? Like, ambition runs in our family. And ambition runs in our family was their rewrite. I had a much longer, more ponderous phrasing for that, which was garbage in retrospect. And I look at that and I'm grateful that they elevated it. But at the end of the day, they're the editors, it's their title, that's their role.
Oh, yeah, I guess I forgot I was looking up the card. Yep, I'm right now. I got, let me see. Working in an established universe, I think that's something that I've had some familiarity with that too. There's definitely, it's interesting working with it. It's like a sonnet, there's limitations,
right?
But you have freedom within that.
Yeah, especially if it's like not your universe,
Right, exactly, yeah. So I can't really think of necessarily, I've had the opportunity to be really inspired by the universe that I work in, and that's really great.
And you haven't had the experience of getting yelled at and getting things cut yet? Oh, you sweet summer child.
Everything has been fantastic, and I have no problem with anything or anyone. At the company I'm still working at.
We love all our employers.
It's wonderful. I actually don't have it. It's a great place to work for. You should all be jealous.
Have you ever had any tweets returned to you?
No. I do have
I hate this tweet.
I do. Oh yeah, people say that all the time. Only once, because then I block them. That's it. Yeah. That's it, I guess.
I told my favorite story already, the one about the Kickstarter game where they were like, nope, cutting this whole thing. That was a little bit hard, but I've had all kinds of different interesting experiences with editing and writing. I've had developers give me text files and be like, yep, just edit the whole thing. And I'm like, wait, so you're not gonna, like, there's no like commenting, like you're not gonna check anything? Like, nope, here's 40,000 lines of dialogue, just go for it. I'm like, oh my God, okay. That was really scary at first, but I've also had like a board game designer, they gave me access to their Google spreadsheet where they had 135 cards, and it was like all the cards, all their descriptions and everything like that. So I went through and made comments. I was like, I recommend this. I recommend that you put a comma here. I recommend that you don't use the same word for the name of a card and the name of an action and also some other thing. Because I'm like, one time you have to capitalize it, like never do this. And I was used to people just saying like either okay or nah, I'm gonna keep that. And he would write like entire paragraphs back to me. Like every comment had like, I'm glad you asked this question. And then like 17 more sentences. And I was like, I am billing this. Like, I have to read this entire thing. Like this is on a timer. So it was like, it was a very interesting experience because I got to go back and forth with the creator and learn so much more about their game, and it really helped influence how I edited like later cards, but at the same time I was like, holy crap, like it was so much time. So, but all in all, I think the very worst experience I had was with writing rules and going back and forth with my partner and being like, it got to a point where it was like, I would be like, no, I love every word. I love every word in this sentence. And he'd be like, can we just make it like a little bit shorter so it fits on this, like on the way that we have the instructions set up like in Photoshop? I'd be like, no, just make the font smaller. I don't care anymore.
So, I worked on a movie tie-in, which, not anything momentous, it was Scooby-Doo.
I was like, was it Sex and the City? That was
Which one? Which Scooby-Doo?
Scooby-Doo, the movie.
Oh.
And in those situations, which is, it feels strange for Scooby, but it's supposed to be confidential, and it's in the contract, you have to lock it inside like a safe box, and it can't be left in the office. But when you work on a movie tie-in, there's like several categories of approvals, and they can come late. They can come like 2 months later, and the game is already like half done. So I had a really great experience working with the team at HQ. I actually had an office email. I was in the office, a lot of design changes affected the writing affected the design, and the level designers and artists, they all had great ideas. So that was a very collaborative experience. So what you make gets sent to an external producer, then gets sent to the licensee, and they all have approvals. And it's a very long process. And they can come back and they say, we want to cut this character, we want to do this, we want to do that. And you have a time period where you can't go backwards anymore. It's like it's already been made, it's already like you can't. Basically, you just need to have a good producer that can go back to you and just go with them and say, no,
Yeah.
don't cut this, because you can't. Or you're not seeing the bill every week, because that would take up too much time in our production.
A good. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And especially since you're telling us 2 months later, like 8 weeks down, we need to ship this game.
I was just gonna say, a good producer is like a tank. Like they get in there first and they take all the aggro, and you get in the back and get the content through. It's awesome. I didn't know how good they were until I started at Firefly, and we have a great one on our team. It's just killing it.
Right, and a lot of people underestimate what a producer does, but if you have a good producer, that's when you feel like, oh, maybe you don't, it's sort of like this invisible thing. If you have a bad producer, you kind of know it. If you have a good producer, it kind of smooths everything over, and you're not really sure what they're doing. It's like maybe it seems like they're not doing anything. They're just really good at their job and making sure everything happens.
Yeah, if you have a good producer, you can spend more time working.
Yeah.
So, when I was at ArenaNet, just after we shipped Guild Wars 2, we shipped first release content. It was sort of like the early version of the seasonal content we ended up doing. And I guess I was the narrative lead for an infinite dungeon project called Fractals of the Mist, where you would jump in with your friends and you would take on exceedingly harder and harder dungeons. And we only had a very short amount of time to get it done. So every day was, what are we doing? What works, what doesn't? Can I write around it? Can the artists get something to work? Can the level designers make something work? And so you had to be excited about the project, but you couldn't get too precious with your words because something might have to cut or something might have to change. And it was happening on a daily, if not hourly basis. It came down to, I think, the most crazy example was we were in the VO studio recording lines for it, and one of our directors came in and said, "I hate the name." What? The name is gonna be spoken by like the main NPC you meet. I don't like it. Okay. So mad scramble and one almost heart attack later. In 20 minutes, we communicated down to Burbank where the VO studio was and we got the name fixed. And at that point, you just had to, check your ego at the door and get the project done because it has a deadline. The clock is always ticking. There comes a point, as you said, where nothing can be added anymore. The box has to close and the game has to ship. And along the way, if you can put a little bit of your soul into it, that's all the better.
All right, cool. I think we successfully got some mics set up for questions. Is there an enforcer who can give me a thumbs up for that? And no one's there.
Oh, no, they're leaving.
Okay.
They don't have any questions.
Let's stretch
Him
for
too, that
time.
guy. He's
Yeah, that's all good. There's actually one more question on my list until we get that going, because I don't know whether those mics work or not. So, okay. So, until we know for sure whether there are mics, let's talk about the future of game writing. And if there's any cool stuff that we're seeing in new games, any new techniques, any recent games that you really loved that you thought inspired you and are techniques you want to steal, techniques you think will change things in the future, or things you're really glad to see slowly die. So let's talk about future things. Let's go crazy. Yep.
I think the big elephant in the room is virtual reality.
That's true.
Figuring out how we're going to tell stories in a virtual space. Right now, everything just looks like a very glorified first-person shooter point of view. And I think if we're going to start telling more immersive stories, we're going to have to figure out how to tell, first-person point of view, and then have the narrative circle around you and make, sense in context. Instead of just leading room to room to room, is to have more sort of ambient atmospheric storytelling.
Yeah, I actually got to play that Trials on Tatooine thing at GDC, the one where you actually have a lightsaber and are standing around in the HTC Vive 3D room, and oh my god, they finally got lightsaber content right. And the writing in that is so light, it's like Han Solo's talking to you out of a radio, and then a platform layers down. I'm so immersed in this narrative that is 7 lines of dialogue and me holding a remote control, and then R2-D2 is beeping at me, but I am more immersed in this than I have been in something that is gorgeously written with literary references and stuff. No, let me stand here and block those blaster bolts. And that's another thing that we have to kind of do as writers with our ego is sometimes I'll be at a writing conference and somebody who's new to writing will be like, why do they keep, what about when gameplay gets in the way of the story? Or what about when the art director wants to change something in your story and you're all sort of working together? It's a coherent whole. And as writers in games, we've got to realize that the story comes from so many places other than words. And as we move more towards VR, and in VR it's really hard to have people read text. That's a thing that they're slowly learning, and it's hard to subtitle dialogues and stuff like that. So we're getting even more away from text as we get more into the VR world, which is, you know, in some ways terrifying, but in some ways completely awesome. So
Yeah, and I'd just like to add something that I'm looking forward to, and this is going to sound a weird juxtaposition, but please bear with me. The game No Man's Sky, which is coming later this year, and also Pokemon Go.
Where is my Pokemon Go? I want it now.
So here's why it intrigues me. Both games are going to take up in wide open spaces, and a lot of it is going to be the story that you tell in your head. So the question is, how are both of these games going to keep you interested and keep you going and allow you to tell the story in your head and reconcile the larger meta narrative arc that's going to happen? I think you can get around that by not throwing a bunch of words at people. But the idea is to trust that you're going to have synchronicity between the story you write and the stories that the players write in their heads. So I'm really looking forward to see how those two shake out.
So I'm involved in some weird stuff in terms of like healthcare games. I've talked about writing not only for wearable devices, but really for writing for data. Like I want you to get on the scale and give me all these numbers or take your blood pressure and all this stuff, and how do you make this into a story or virtual world or class or something like that. So these things are going to be part of your lives and you're being able to wear them, and they're not going to be as obtrusive as a hive, but these are things that go in your watches, artificial skin maybe. There's definitely some interesting stuff that's going on with wearables.
I couldn't even think of an answer to this question before the panel, so bear with me. I've been playing Hyper Light Drifter. I'm not finished it yet, but that game like hurts me. It's so beautiful, and I feel the same way. It makes me feel the same way that Fez made me feel. And I just wish that, those are games that, sometimes you just don't know what the hell's going on, but you really fill the blanks in.
Yeah.
And I wish that more games were like that, where they're subtle but still really powerful.
A game that I just finished playing and like a lot is Soma. And I think we've all played games where you're playing it's a platformer or a shooter or whatever, and 100% divorced from that is, a voice reading you some philosophy, or maybe you find like an apocalyptic log or something. And Soma is a game where there's a central philosophical question happening there. And in case you haven't played, I don't want to spoil it, but the question is raised, and then it forces you to answer it through the experience of playing it. I'm trying to be as vague as I can, but the execution of that and how satisfying it is in that game just fucking floored me. So that's a great game, and I highly recommend it.
Have you played the Stanley Parable?
Yes.
Can we talk about
Pretty cool.
That game was so hysterical. I don't know if anybody would. There's a trophy for like opening door 47 or a Chivo, and I was like, oh, that's easy. Yeah. And I go there, and he's like, ha ha ha! You thought I was just gonna have you open a door, and it was like, then I'm jumping 10 times on the copy machine, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm such a slave to this achievement right now. I love what that game did to my brain. That was a really fun game.
Similarly, the Beginner's Guide is just so good. Oh, it's the some better word than sequel, but you guys know what I mean.
Spiritual successor.
Yeah, made by half the team who did Stanley Parable. Again, it forces you to participate in something as it's unfolding what's happening in a way that's really interesting. Another high recommendation.
I'm sorry, can I say one more thing?
You may.
I also like games, I didn't think I would, but I like games that are like painful, like Cart Life and Papers, Please, where it's like, you're basically having an anxiety attack, and you're like, why am I playing this game? But you can't stop, and you're like, those games are also really, I like where, sorry, James.
Totally cool. It's totally cool. So no, building off as was previously begun. I think games are the most progressive storytelling medium on the planet right now. I think by virtue of player choice, which is a dynamic that no other storytelling medium has had before, we have interactivity that is completely game changing. And so as a narrative designer, I often say that I'm not telling stories that I want a player to passively consume. If I were doing so, I would write a book. I would write a screenplay. I'm building systems in which players tell their own stories. And so I heard someone say once that narrative design is game design, and narrative designers are game designers. And I took that to heart, and I think it's true. I think collapsing the distinction between narrative and combat, or any other sort of sort of ancillary gameplay dynamic, that they are the same thing. Narrative is what the player does. And I think that is often and increasingly letting go of text as a vehicle. Yeah. It's often ambient. Like ambient VO is a pretty classic, tried and true storytelling technique, which just you can deploy for all kinds of world building purposes. But even combat itself is a form of narrative, and so
Undertale.
Yeah.
Was anyone here at PAX South this year?
I was.
Anyone here? You were here?
It was me. I was there.
You were there? You were there? Did anyone by any chance come to my talk? Anyone go to? I gave a talk there called Emergent Narrative via Horizontal Content, and I'm looking at games like Cards Against Humanity, which is a really lean game, and you say what you will about it, but it's it has combinatorial. No, I think lean is not a pejorative.
No, I was commenting on say what you will about it.
Oh.
Sorry.
Well, no, I mean it's not universally praised. There are
Ignore me.
Sorry. So I mean you have content which is stored separately horizontally in these decks, which are combinatorial, and you can have an exponential number of combinations of things, and from that the players will infer or create their own, impute their own sort of contextual narrative on top of that. And so I think that, at least for me as a narrative designer, that's where I'm trying to push this medium. That's where I'm trying to go, is where you build systems with the building blocks, as Ken Levine says, like the narrative Legos in place for building, for telling stories, and you let the player do it themselves, because that's what our medium is about.
Have you played Codenames?
No.
Has anybody played Codenames? So I was talking to somebody about Codenames, and I realized that Codenames is an amazing narrative game because the two leaders are just giving their team a single word and a number, and then their team is just writing this entire story about what they think that person means. And like one time I was like, America, too. And my friend was like, well, I think Nicole saw the word hawk on the board and thought it was eagle, so I'm gonna touch hawk. And after the game, I was like, thank God you know me so well. Because that's exactly what happened. As soon as I said America 2 and looked at the board again, I was like, oh no, what have I done? But I love Codenames.
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't fear the fact that VR doesn't host and showcase text as well as previous models did. We should just grow with that dynamic as storytellers, be more flexible, use a wider array of tools.
Yeah, and one of the things you'll slowly learn if you're in the game industry is that there's absolutely nothing that makes everybody happy. Like, there are so few games that everybody would like. I remember I tried to get my brother to play Mass Effect, and my brother was like, I hate all these choices. They should decide what story they want to tell me. I shouldn't have to decide what's gonna be interesting. I want the story they think is the best one. And it's like, that is the opposite of the majority audience reaction of BioWare fans to BioWare games, but it is a complete demographic from somebody who actually cares about narrative. And again, it's the same thing of somebody who doesn't want to see any text versus, and I'm going to pitch this company even though I've not worked for them yet, is Fallen London came out on the iPhone in the last few days. Everyone here like, yeah, I love Fallen London, and Fallen London is almost nothing but text. It's an interactive fiction journey where you're like building your own character through interacting with these short text passages, and so some people are really going to like that, and some people are going to be like, I don't play this game to read. I don't want to read while I'm playing games. And so diverse styles of storytelling are always going to be a thing. When I was younger, I thought that eventually we would figure out like one thing that everybody likes generically forever, and that's never going to happen because we all have different tastes and stuff like that. I have no idea how much. Oh, we have 5 minutes left? All right.
Can we not do a Q&A?
Do we have any? Does
Yeah.
anybody have any questions?
Do we have working
Get your mic.
microphones?
Yeah.
Can we have questions, or do we
Just tap the mic
for
and
5
we'll see
minutes
if it
or
makes
not?
that horrible sound.
Also, before
I'm sorry, I'm terrible. If not, come and shout your questions.
Can you hear
Before
us?
they turn off our mics and
All right.
everybody runs away, Red, your cosplay is amazing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Really good.
We love it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, yeah, we'll try to lightning round and then we'll be outside when the panel is over, but,
All right,
yeah.
let's go fast.
Go ahead, ask your question.
So
Hopefully
yes,
that
just
works.
quickly, I wanted to ask, so you talked about getting started in games writing, which was really cool. I wanted to ask, so what pieces of writing, either games related, it could be in a game or maybe in a book, that you would recommend for somebody who's interested in getting started in games writing?
Okay, this was the question of what should somebody who's looking to get started into games write? The simplest answer right now is that there are 2 engines out there, Twine and Inkle Writer, and there are a couple
Also
other ones.
Inform 7's a good
And
one, too.
Inform 7. Look those up and make a mini game in them. They're really easy to use. If you can use, like, if you can make a website, you can use something like that. Does anybody here have anything else lightning round to suggest that people write if they are looking to write into games?
As I said before, critical theory about the games.
D&D, you can get a group together and you can be a dungeon master. That's a great way.
Yeah, publish a module.
Make an
Or
analog
just your
game.
friends, just to start. Yeah.
Make an analog game and write lots of flavor for it.
Screenwriting. Look up basics of screenwriting.
Okie dokie.
Steal your friends' keys and force them to solve a series of riddles.
Yeah. All right, next question. We'll lightning round as many of these as we can until they yell at us.
Other side though, this guy.
Okay.
Blue Man.
Okay, Blue Man. Okay, I'm Blue Man. So obviously this panel was very enlightening in terms of sort of the creative and artistic rewards and sort of pitfalls of games writing. But I noticed that you all have either are currently holding or have held multiple jobs with multiple companies in the past. Like, for something that isn't constantly content updated, like an MMO, what are the realities of holding a writer position at a game company?
I have a full-time job that isn't, like I have a full-time job at a college and I'm a grad student, so everything I do is in my spare time, which is very sparse.
Yeah.
So, I think you guys all work full-time.
I am currently in between gigs, and usually I've seen the trend more toward contract. Some places, if you're like a senior narrative designer or a senior narrative editor, you're going to have a full-time job there. But for the most part, I've seen a growing trend in contract.
Yeah, everything I've mentioned has all been contract work.
Yep, and I have moved across the country multiple times. Oh, no, we're out of time. And I've moved multiple times across the country, and so all is chaos.
Yeah, we will see.